Welcome to how I made this Gothic Mermaid outfit for the Gothic cruise. I made the top, belt, arm sleeves, and choker for this look, and my inspiration for this was Charity Grace, who is the DIY mermaid queen. I will link to her channel and Instagram in the description. And now, on to the DIY. Starting with the top, I used a bra from Temu as my base, and this one had a lot of padding in it, which was very comfy, as well as removable straps. And of course, no DIY is complete without a helpful cat. Highly recommend employing a feline fashion advisor. They will work for treats. First thing you'll need aside from the bra is foam clay. I got this off Amazon, and I'll link everything I used for this video down below in my Amazon storefront. I also got real large shells from Amazon, and my original plan was to use these and glue them to the bra, but they were much flatter than I expected and very heavy, so I decided to make the shells out of the foam clay instead. So I took some of the clay and I flattened it out, then pressed one of the shells into it to leave an impression. And that worked really well, but what I didn't realize was that the foam clay shrinks as it dries. So I'm really glad I picked the biggest shell to work with. They shrunk down quite a bit, but they were still big enough to work with. I just wanted something that would cover most of the top of the bra. I did that twice, obviously, to get 2 shells. I cut off all the excess foam around the edges, and you can really see the size difference here between the dried and undried shells. Then I started playing around with the shell placement. I'd also gotten several smaller sizes of the real shells, as well as shell sequins. And at first I thought I would just sew all of the sequins to the front, but I ended up scrapping that, so ignore wherever this shows up in the footage. After both shells had dried, I cut the tops of them to look more organic and have that shell-like texture. Then I used my trusty E6000 glue to attach them to the bra itself. And by using this glue, it makes it so you can actually wear the bra in the water if you want, which is awesome. I highly recommend using gloves and a mask though, as this glue is toxic. Then once that dried, I started adding the smaller shells. Not gonna lie, it was a pain to have to hold all of them while waiting for the glue to dry. So I tried using one of my hair clips to hold everything together, which worked quite well. Then I tried it on and realized that the foam shells were sticking straight up, which was a bit awkward looking. I wanted them to curve and contour to my body more, so I grabbed a heat gun and I started to heat up the foam so that I could bend it. Do not, I repeat, do not heat up the foam while wearing the bra. You will burn yourself. Trust me. And after several rounds of heating it up, then bending it, the shells were shaped quite nicely to my chest. And if you have a thinner piece of foam, this will go much faster. My shells were quite thick, so it took me ages to get them to bend down as far as I wanted. Now, I love shopping at my local Amazon return store, and I found some nipple clamps there, like a lot of them. So I thought I would try to use this one with chains on the top. I also had a variety of red beads to use. I sewed one of the larger ones to the middle after removing the shell sequins from earlier. Then I tried the chains, but ended up not really liking them. I also tried this lace trim, but I wasn't a fan of that either. I then glued the shell sequins to the tops of the bra just to add something to the empty spaces. I also discovered that nipple clamps make wonderful craft clamps. A few had bells on them, which made it very festive. And once everything was dry, it was time for painting. I just used regular black acrylic paint to make everything black. This was a very pleasing process. I added a few more small shells to the top, which I painted as well, and I was so tempted to just keep it all black since it looked so nice. But I continued with this black jewelry chain. I just used a pair of needle nose pliers to open the links to get the length that I wanted. Then I took a needle and black thread to sew the ends of all the chains to the bra itself. I ended up covering these with E6000 later on, but I wanted them to be really secure. I like planning things out ahead of time, so I tried a few variations of chain draping until I arrived here. This one made me think of a spider web a little bit, so I thought it was perfect. Then I hand sewed all of the chain ends onto the bra, which was a pain in the ass, and here is how it looked. Definitely worth it. Then I went back to painting, and I used this red apple acrylic paint and did some dry brushing and mixing the paint with water to get this lovely red and black gradient effect. I also did this for the big shell, so everything was cohesive. I tried it on and loved how it looked, and it's shiny because I used a fixative spray to help protect the paint job. Now for the part that took the longest, the rhinestones. I used red flatback rhinestones in several different sizes, and I actually got another tube of E6000 for this just because this one had a precision tip, and trying to use the regular size tube was not easy. At first, when I was gluing them down, I left a lot of space in between them, but I didn't end up loving how that looked, so I just went back in and filled in all of the gaps with as many stones as I could, and I ended up liking that a lot better. I also got some black flatback rhinestones and started to glue those all over the bottom of the bra. The sparkle was insane. I love my sparkle, so I was very happy with how much there was on this so far. And I just laid down a layer of E6000, then used tweezers to place all of them wherever I wanted. Time consuming? Yes, but also very satisfying. Then once I completely covered the bottom of the bra in stones, it was time to add the red teardrops. I wanted them to look like drops of blood shimmering on the chains, so I got some black jump rings, and I just used the same pliers to open them up, put the gems on, and then close them on the chains wherever I wanted them to be placed. And this was the final configuration. It made me feel a little bit like a belly dancer, not gonna lie. Next, I glued those shell sequins onto the sides of the bra where it wraps around me just to add a little more detail. I knew my hair would cover most of the sides, but I didn't want them to be completely bare. And then I painted them black as well. I know, they were so pretty with their original color, but it just didn't go with my color scheme. I was doing all red and black. And now for the belt. The base was a belt I found on Temu, and I thought the scalloped lace on top and bottom looked a lot like shells, so it was perfect. I used E6000 to glue some of the smaller shells from Amazon on top, and then I started playing around with rhinestone placement. I used both red and black, and I ended up lining the top and bottom of the belt all with the black. And I used the red as more like accents within the belt itself. And to apply, I just used my tweezers and dipped them into the E6000 big tube, then placed them on the belt. This was before I bought the E6000 with the precision tip, so I had to get creative, and I used a toothpick to smear the glue where I wanted it, and then I placed each stone by hand. This whole project definitely gave me a very healthy respect for anyone who does rhinestoning full time. It is so much work. Very pretty in the end though. I really liked how the black looked on the top and bottom, and then it was time to paint those shells with the same black acrylic paint. And with this paint for all the shells, I had to use several coats to get it dark enough. I think it was at least 3 or 4. And once again, I was tempted to leave it just black because it looked so nice that way. But I did want it to match the top, so I used the same red acrylic paint to do the red ombre for these shells too. I went in with watered down paint and sometimes just plain water to get that smooth gradient. Then it was time for the beading. I used these check seed beads in ruby, black thread, as well as the same beads I used on the top. Using my needle, I strung them together in 2 different styles. One with the large red piece at the bottom, and one with the teardrop. I attached them to the belt using the black thread to see if I liked it, then laid out how many beads I would need for the rest. Then I assembled and attached those, and assembled and attached the teardrop ones. I was so happy with how it looked, and it wasn't that heavy, surprisingly. On to the arm sleeves. I had a shirt with long sleeves from Temu that I liked but never really wore, so I just cut the sleeves off to use for this project. Once again, Kitty was very helpful. When cutting, I made sure to leave as much of the original stitching as possible towards the top so they would stay together. Then I took this black lace trim and cut it to fit around my arms, then pinned it to the sleeves to see how it would look. Once I was happy with that, I stitched them together using my needle and thread. Then I took some heavyweight black string, which I would use for the lacing, and cut out 2 pieces, one for each arm. And I just looped that through all of the empty spots in the lace, trying to pick areas that were more sturdy so it wouldn't just pull right through the delicate parts of the lace. It's not the prettiest, but it worked. And it kept the sleeves up on my arms, which is what I was going for. Then I stitched the edges of the lace down to the black fabric. I didn't want the trim to lift up since it had so many little delicate pieces, so I pinned everything first and then stitched it all down by hand. I also ended up stitching it across the top to make it more secure. And here I'm showing you exactly where I stitched the lace to the main fabric of the sleeve. And I left the middle lace piece kind of open because, well, there was nothing to attach it to, since this was where the split in the sleeve was. The hand stitching may have tied with the rhinestones for being the most time-consuming part of all of this. Then, of course, I had to rhinestone these too. And I just used the black rhinestones, so that way I could wear these with multiple other outfits since they were all black. Now that I had my precision tube of E6000, doing this was a breeze, And I didn't want to go too overboard with the sparkle on these, so I only did a few in the middle lace pieces and then a line along the top. I highly recommend using a flexible glue like this for, arm pieces because you have to move around and you're always moving your arms. So because this glue is flexible once it dries, it was perfect. And this is the final look. I was so happy with it, and the arm sleeve stayed up really well. I was surprised because I was moving around quite a bit on the dance floor. I was flinging my arms left and right. I was dancing. It was the perfect amount of glitter and goth, and the crown that I had really pulled everything together. I did not make this. This was made by Chelsea's Flower Crowns in Australia. I will link her shop below. I also added a black mesh skirt that I got from Shein and a black literal fishnet that I got from Amazon. And for my choker, I just used that same black lace trim, cut it to fit my neck, and added black rhinestones for a little sparkle. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial, and I'll see you next time.